very good attorney from my firm, Sochi Quesada. Hello, Sochi.
Hi, Neil.
And today we're going to be talking about the challenges that people face when they're going through a divorce and they're having family law issues. And we're going to talk about some of the ways they can overcome those challenges. So personally, I've been practicing law almost 28 years, so I've been involved in quite a few family law cases. And I'm going to have Sochi talk to you about her experience in family law cases. So, Sochi, first of all, how long have you been an attorney?
I have been practicing for 19 years.
Wow. And have you been practicing in the area of family law the entire time, or how would you?
I would say yes. So when I went to school in New York and came to California, and I got involved because I wanted to volunteer. I wasn't sure where I was going to live. I didn't know if I was going to move to Texas or back to the East Coast or what I was going to do. So I ended up looking to volunteer for legal aid. And it was this very amazing Eastern European who was the legal director, who was the director of legal aid for that district. And she said, "No, you get a job." And so she literally hired me. And I'm like, "But I don't want to work. I don't know if I want to live here." "Oh, no, you're going to get a job." And I'm thinking, I didn't know how to say no to her. She was a little scary. So I did that. And I worked as a paralegal while I was studying for the bar. And I had a desk in the family law facilitator's office in the Indio courthouse in the Coachella Valley. Oh. And then when I passed the bar, I had another attorney come and find me. He's like, "You're Sochi Quesada, right?" Because by this time, everybody knows me because all of my paperwork is going upstairs and all the attorneys are reading my paperwork and saying, "Who's this person preparing the paperwork?" So he found it was me and he said, "Do you have a job yet?" And I said, "No, I don't even know if I want to live here." And he says, "Nope, come work for me." And I said, "Okay." And then it just kind of took off a life form of its own. And I've tried to get out of family law a couple of times, but it was like the mafia and it kept pulling me back in. And then I thought, okay, God, maybe it's just something I'm good at. So it's something I've stayed in. Yeah.
Well, nice. Well, today I'm sure there are quite a few people out there who may be going through a divorce or who may be involved in a divorce who want help, and guidance on what they should be doing. And hopefully by the end of this podcast, we can provide that information to them. Now, in your experience, what are some of the things that the clients are facing right before they file for a divorce? And I mean, when they're in their home and they're contemplating filing for a divorce and they're worried about what their spouse will think and all of these other things, what kinds of things are they going through from your experience?
Okay, if you don't mind, I'd like to interject one of my beliefs that I think would help a lot and would avoid a lot of problems are prenuptial agreements. So in the state of California, everything from the date of marriage to the date of separation, and a lot of people think the date of separation is some sort of formal process, but it's not. It's a date that the parties separate and their conduct is conducive to that separation. So it's not like some magic, it's just the date that the parties agree we're never getting back together. So it's from the date of marriage to the date of separation, everything belongs to the both of you. So whatever you make from work and your paycheck, and you put your paycheck, even if you put it in a different account, it still belongs to the both of you. You buy a boat or you buy a car, that's a debt for the both of you, and that's an asset for the both of you. The beauty about prenuptial agreements is that you can actually state, look, everything we get is going to be ours. And then when we divorce, if we want, we can say that, okay, we're going to it doesn't matter what the economy is. It doesn't matter. We're going to have the debts paid off before we do this. We're going to, and so it lists out the conditions set forth for how they will divide everything. And I think that avoids a lot of problems. And you can also in a prenuptial agreement talk about spousal support, which segues into the issues of a divorce, right? So some people think, well, I never commingled my money. I never put my paycheck into a joint account. And people are sincerely surprised that even though they don't commingle funds, that it's still community property. And so everything that they purchased, even though they put a car in their own name, that's community property. That debt, along with that car, is a community debt. So you owe it too. And so a lot of people, and then they get hung up on, and then when they realize that everything is community, they get hung up on the value of the house, the value of the assets. I have clients who will even disagree on who have stocks and bonds, and those can get complicated. When they vest, when they don't vest, if someone leaves a company before it vests, and then the other party thinks they still have access to it. So there's a lot of complicated issues with the division of assets and property that you need an attorney for. Sometimes you need a team, because you just don't need an attorney. You may need a forensic accountant who can decide, okay, let me trace these funds, because maybe both husband and wife had separate houses before they got married. And so we need an accountant to trace the payment of these separate properties during the marriage, and to determine the characterization of what's theirs, what's mine, what's yours.
I see. So what do you say to the person at home right now who has made a decision that he or she does not want to be married anymore, and they are wondering if they are the lower earner? They're wondering, what am I going to do if I file for divorce? How am I going to get help? What is it that you can do as an attorney to help that person? What can you do for that person?
So that person who's sitting there, what can I do when I'm going to go through a divorce? Okay. You know how people, like a lot of couples, unfortunately, the death knell I've always noticed with a lot of my clients is when they go to couples counseling and they're trying to fix the marriage. Use that to talk to each other and be amicable about an upcoming divorce. Set the ego aside and just accept the law for what it is. We don't make the rules, we just litigate them. And so it just would work so much better if people would just, you don't want to spend more in your divorce than you would when you got married. So if you look to just put everything on paper and know that it doesn't matter if you spend $75,000 for this piece of asset when it's worth 20. So just to be reasonable, to look at it as it's a business, a dissolution of a business, because that's kind of how California looks at marriages, right? And for the lower earning spouse, that's a tough one. And California used to be really good at maintaining the status quo. And the beautiful thing about working for your firm is that we represent parties all over the state of California. So we get a flavor for the different judges, right? And some judges are okay with giving spousal support, and others are just like, yeah, I will, but maybe on the lower side. Or maybe I'll put a termination date, but still reserve jurisdiction. And that's a whole nother story. So for a lower earning spouse, know that you're just figure out what you need to do. If you need to go back to school, you can get help with that. You can get help from the opposing party, the higher earner, to go back to school. And so that way you can figure out how to get back into the workforce. Retirements are also divisible between the two people. So you'll have that extra income, and just maybe talk to a financial advisor and know that you're going to live on this limited income and you're going to have to be on a budget and figure out how you can live accordingly and still have a decent life.
I see. So I'm sure you've had clients, and I've had clients before, they've come into the office and they're scared to file for divorce because they claim, I don't have any money. And if I file for divorce, I'll be alone. I won't be able to get anything. And I'm sure in the past you've probably taken in some of those people, and you've probably filed a motion for support and stuff like that, and was able to help them. Can you elaborate on how you can help that person with regard to filing for support when they believe they're not going to get any money and they're afraid of even initiating a divorce process?
So fear is always a natural part of it. I mean, I went through my own divorce, and I was terrified. I was like a plumber with leaky faucets in my own house, right? So I totally get the fear, but you can't hide from it. So just got to move forward. And what you can do is there are two types of support in California. There's temporary, which is based on a pure mathematical calculation, and permanent, which is based on a subjective approach that we present evidence to a judge. Now, the calculation, I always tell my clients, look, you can Google California Child Support Calculator, and even if it says child support, you can actually run numbers for spousal support and get an idea of what you're going to get. That way, you can plan for it and not have so much fear and know, okay, this is what I'm going to get, and this is how I'm going to plan to move forward. And what we do is we file for your divorce, and we file alongside with your divorce a motion to request attorney's fees. So we'll serve the opposing party, and once we serve the opposing party, we'll file your motion. And it's a really easy motion. It's all we're asking is, look, Your Honor, he's making this much, she's making this much, someone needs support. And the court just does the calculation. And it's going to be a little bit off because their program's a little bit different than the California Child Support Calculator, but it still gives you an idea, and then you can start collecting.
I see. And you were able to file a motion for support as well at that time?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So then there is hope, I guess, for that person who's afraid of not being able to receive anything because they're the lower earner. You're saying there is hope if they get an attorney can file paperwork for them and try to get them some support and try to get them fees from their spouse.
Oh, yeah. We definitely, at the same time of requesting support, we can request attorney's fees. Herein lies the rub, though. Like I said, the beauty about working for you is I get a flavor of all of the judges, right? Some will just say, hey, yeah, I'm going to give you attorney, but it also depends on the income of the other person. So I've had a client who was making, I think she was making $1,500 with 5 kids, and husband was making $10,000. But because they had a house that they were already selling and looking at future proceeds, the judge only gave her $7,500 in attorney's fees, whereas what we requested was $25,000. So the courts are not inclined to give as much as in attorney's fees as they used to, which is kind of interesting. Like I said, especially when you have an asset that's being sold and they're saying, look, you have money now, you can use that. If you don't have money, then the court's inclined to give you a little bit more.
I see. So I've had situations where, I've taken in the client and, the client wanted to try to get support, right? And unfortunately, there are people who are nefarious, people who try to cheat the system. Have you had cases in which the other side maybe try to conceal money, hide their income? And if that happens, what can you do to help the person who wants support get support from some spouse who is trying to hide income?
So there's two ends of that spectrum, right? I dealt with a lot with that when I was volunteering for legal aid, because legal aid, you have to qualify based on your income, right? So a lot of these people were working and taking money under the table, and they weren't putting it in a bank account. They weren't putting it in someone else's bank account. And while they were married, the other spouse knew that they would come home with cash. So they knew they were getting money. So look, we can do a few things. You can hire, if you have the resources, to hire an investigator to follow that person for a couple days, especially if like, let's say they're doing mechanic on the side, or if they're doing gardening on the side, whatever it may be, and they're collecting cash, we can have someone follow and take photos. In addition to your testimony, we can have you testify. As long as you're a credible witness and the judge believes what you're saying, as long as you're not looking shifty and trying to hide information, but as long as you're straightforward, the judge will take into consideration what your testimony is. And hopefully based on that, we can get information, or even like text messages. Like hey, I'm getting paid $200 a day so we can go buy that, mattress we've been wanting. And so text messages, emails, social media, for some reason, people post their whole lives on social media. It cracks me up. Like, it's really easy to catch people. I had a guy, he cracked me up. He had 11 kids by 6 different women, right? And we keep telling him it's cheaper by the dozen. Come on, one more. And he took a social media, it was on Facebook, took a picture and fanned out hundreds like this on Facebook. Oh. I got motions from 3 or 4 of the women to represent him because they wanted increases in support. And of course you can count it. Of course you can see how much it is. And of course they argued that was his income. And yeah, he was hit pretty hard with that. So be careful with what you post on social media.
Wow. Well, that is interesting. So, and what about some spouses are saying, hey, if my spouse is powerful, he or she has money, they may be hiding it. Do they have the opportunity to actually subpoena records or do anything to gain access to the other party's records when they're going through a divorce?
Absolutely. So what we do is, and we have the other side of the spectrum, and we have higher earners, we can get investigators who can actually find out all of the bank accounts all over the country. And we find out that information. And with that information, we could subpoena documents, we could subpoena records. So like right now I have a high asset case. Husband has been stealing the money from my client, and he has bank accounts all over, several different banks, several different credit cards she didn't even know existed. But for this investigator, we wouldn't have known. So from here, we're going to take the information the investigator found, we're going to subpoena bank records, and we're going to propound more discovery. And that's just, a Sherlock's Holmes version of paper, right? Hey, what list, we ask, give us all your bank records from the last 5 years. Provide us all your loan applications for the last 5 years, because loan applications are awesome, because people lie on their loan applications, inflate their income. And we have a court case. I haven't seen it. It's been, I haven't shepherdized it in a while, which means I don't know if the law has changed on that particular case. But the courts will say, hey, you say here that you made $10,000 a month on your loan application to buy this truck. We're going to go buy that. So we do the loan applications, bank statements, bank accounts held in any other name. So they have to respond. And are they honest? And do they always respond? No. And that's why from this information, I will propound more discovery and say, admit or deny you have this bank account, because they're not admitting it, but I have the information from the investigator. And so as soon as I go to court and they testify and I said, you denied you had a bank account with Bank of America, right? Yes. Well, here I have proof that you have a bank account with Bank of America, and I can prove that he's lying and he's shifty and he's not a trustworthy witness, and the court should view him as such. So there's ways around figuring that out, especially with the high asset cases. Just if you have the resources, we can do a lot of work.
Okay. And that probably, the same issues that are involved with trying to get spousal support, would you say, with regard to the financial tracing of money and things of that nature, is it similar to child support? Support is support, or how would you describe that?
I would say child support's a little different, where California is much more pragmatic, right? Because we have what's called a parents patriae approach, where the California will step into the shoes of the parent, and they're much more strict. They actually consider, they expand their definition of income for child support. So royalties, rents, trust income, whereas sometimes those are not considered for spousal support, but will be for child support. I've even seen, I even had a case where one of the supporting parent died, and the supported parent goes to probate court to go after the estate for child support. I mean, the state of California is pretty strict on child support. So it's the same calculation, which is a California child support calculator. Here you can calculate child support and spousal support, and out, boom, comes a number. But it's also based on timeshare and income. So timeshare means the amount of time you spend with your kid, right? Whether you get a 50-50 order. So those get a little bit more complex because when we go to court, we go guns a-blazing, right? We want to know, we're going to ask for the default in California is 50-50, absent evidence of domestic violence, alcoholism, drug abuse. We're going to ask for spousal support. And if it's, and the length of marriage at that point still doesn't, it's not relevant. The length of marriage happens at the time of judgment or settlement agreement. We're dealing with child support and attorney's fees and costs. So, I mean, we have a laundry list that we're going into court that turns into like a mini trial. And so for child support, yeah, we can definitely get started on getting that. The court's not going to thumb its nose at child support. The kids need to be taken care of. And the state of California looks at the best interest of the children, not just for custody, but also for being supported.
Interesting. So what do you say to those people out there who they've made a decision that they don't want to be with their spouse anymore and they want to be divorced in a couple of weeks? Are there any time restrictions or guidelines with respect to when a person can be divorced finally, or what's the law on that?
I always tell my clients, it's up to you. My divorce lasted 4 months. I did not want to be in and out of court. He didn't want to be in and out of court. And I told him so. I told him, you're going to spend a lot of money, and for what? So you can get what we're asking for. And so he learned his lesson $40,000 later. And I didn't need to learn a lesson. I just spent the filing fee. But we ended it in 4 months. And there are people who just want to fight and fight and fight. And that's why I say it is so much better to get in a mindset before you file that you're going to look towards resolution. Yes, you may hate this person. You may despise this person. You may resent this person. But really the best way is just to look at a fair resolution for everything. And even though he or she wasn't around while you were taking care of the baby, even though he or she is not around, and how can they possibly be a parent now? If you want to get divorced, then look for a speedy resolution and be okay that you're not going to take everything. California is a community property state. And if that's the case and you're okay with that, then the state of California says from the date of filing, it's 6 months that you can get the divorce entered. So even though I resolved it in 4 months, I got my judgment back 6 months later and I was divorced. So we were done and we haven't gone back since. And that's another thing. California with family law court, it's a continuing jurisdiction. It's like, if it were like for Elmer Fudd, hunting season open all year round, it's kind of frightening because people can always go back and then, people are angry and resentful. But if you leave that anger and resentment and just work through it, you can get this done pretty quickly. But it's always up to you. It's always up to the parties.
So even though some people may be thinking out there that once they initiate a divorce, it's all battles, all guns are blazing, right? They feel they think they have to fight it out. But it seems what you're saying is that people could, if they want, they can reach an agreement, sign documents and so forth that resolve all their issues, and that can be done very quickly, but they have to wait 6 months until their divorce can become final. Is that right?
Right.
But they can resolve everything if they want, if they don't want to fight, sooner than later.
Right.
I see. And typically, have you had any experience with that where people would come into you and say, hey, my spouse and I, we agreed on how to divide our assets and we want a divorce. If someone comes to you like that, what can you do for that couple?
Pat them on the back, say you're doing a great job, you're making the best decision. Usually these people come to me with already agreements regarding custody and visitation. It's really hard for a lot of the moms out there, right? Because they're like, I was with my kids all the time and now I have to share 50-50. It's really difficult. That was really difficult for me for the first 2 years. And after that, I'm like, hey, this is kind of nice. I have me time. This is awesome. And I actually ended up talking to a client recently and she said, I can go on a date. I'm like, girl, you can go and do wash at 2 o'clock in the morning. You do you, whatever you want. This is a beautiful thing. Taking a break is actually a good thing. I'm terrible because I'm also recommending it to my married friends. Like, maybe you guys should live apart, take a week off from the kids. It's so awesome. But if they come with an agreement, and yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of courage to do that, and to set your ego aside and your pride. And they come to me and they say, we have all of these agreements. We put it in writing, and we protect the client, right? That's so important. So, for example, I have another client right now where he entered into a marital settlement agreement, agreed to pay support for long term, knowing his ex was cohabitating, and didn't terminate jurisdiction. So after 9 years, she can go back to court and ask for more money. And I'm like, that's not an agreement. That's that's highway robbery. And so we have to now. I told him, I think we still can. We can go back to court and probably reduce it to 0, and argue that jurisdiction should be terminated. Whether the court will do that or not on a over 20-year marriage is most likely no, but it doesn't hurt to ask. So that's why it's fundamentally important to have an attorney do your marital settlement agreement, because those key points need to be included. And then I also document with the opposing party if they are self-represented. Go get an attorney. Because if they ever come back and say, well, I don't like it anymore, and they have buyer's remorse, then I can say, hey, I told you to go get an attorney. You didn't want to. That's on you. But yeah, it's really easy. And that's why it's so important for us to do the agreement, because there's legal recitals that we can include that the average person doesn't know. And that's why we went to school.
I see. So what do you say to the person out there who thinks he or she can represent themselves in a divorce when there's a lot of property at issue and there are major issues involving a divorce? What would you say to that person?
I'm cringing, and please don't. Please don't. Because you're just going to make a mess out of it. I mean, we have seen clients who are very intelligent, and they can read, and they read the law. There's a reason why we went to law school for 3 years. There's a reason why you and I went and took the bar for 3 days. Now I don't even want to talk about it. It makes me angry. They're now saying and thinking that maybe nobody needs to take the bar anymore. Like, hey, no. But there's a reason why we went to school, because we know how to do it. And these high asset cases can be incredibly complicated. I mean, there are times, because I'm not the best at math, and I'm sitting there scratching my head and crying. I'm like, I don't understand why these numbers aren't coming out right, And that's why you need the accountant. And I can call the accountant and say, tell me why my numbers aren't coming out right. And so we work on your case. Do not try it yourself. You're going to mess it up, and then we have to fix it. And then there is just a mess with the judge, with opposing party. Please stay away from that.
Okay, so I'm trying to wrap this part up. So what about the person who, they have a spouse who wants to fight over everything, right? And it seems like it's going to take forever for the divorce to become final, but they want to be divorced. They want to have the status of their marriage divorced. Is there anything you can do for that person when they're up against a spouse who's dragging everything out, but they want to meet someone else, or they want to go and maybe remarry, and they want this marriage to be over sooner than later? How can you help that person?
I conditionally say, unless you do a prenuptial agreement on the next marriage, I'm not going to do your divorce. No kidding. I will still do it. But I'm a strong believer in prenuptial agreements. I will say we can file what's called a bifurcation of marital status. What that means, bifurcation is a sexy word for separate. We separate that issue of the marriage and we terminate it to make you single again. And unfortunately, we have to request a hearing if opposing party doesn't agree to sign off on the agreement to make you and restore you to single people again, so that you can go off and get married with a prenuptial agreement. So yeah, it's not that complicated. It's just, sometimes there may be snafus because of insurance issues or retirement. But other than that, I mean, we figure that out. We figure that out also. And that's why I'm saying it's better to have an attorney, because we understand it's a snowball effect, right? A domino effect. So we understand what affects the other. So just hire us to do it.
That sounds good. Almost wrapping up. One other thing. What about the person out there they've had their spouse's name for a very long time, and they're wondering, if I get a divorce, how complicated would it be for me to change my name, or do I have to keep that name? What do you have to say?
Oh my God, I was so excited to go back to Casada. You have no idea. My married name was Flores, which is the equivalent of Smith in English. So it's not that hard at all. You get your judgment, you go to the Social Security office, you make an appointment. So you're in and out in 10 minutes. You go make an appointment with the DMV, you're in and out in 10 minutes, and bada bing, bada boom, you have your new license with your name back, and it's awesome.
Right. Okay, so I think for this particular podcast, we're going to wrap it up. We are going to, do another podcast that talks about different issues with regard to divorce, property issues and things of that nature. But thank you for listening, and Sochi, I thank you for coming.
Of course.
And we, of course, will see you next time.